Do you love horror comics? I know I love horror comics. I'm Deanna Chapman, and today I'm going to break down a few of the comics that you can check out in DC Universe Infinite. Most people probably think about this app as a place to read Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman comics, things like that, but there's actually a pretty decent horror selection, especially with the recent addition of the Hill House comics, which were all curated, and even some written by Joe Hill, who, for those who may not know, is the son of Stephen King, and as someone who hosts a Stephen King podcast, I definitely had to check out a lot of these comics, but those won't be the only recommendations. There will definitely be things for anyone who wants to check out some older stuff, but let's dive in. The first one I want to recommend is Basketful of Heads by Joe Hill and art by Leo Max, and this was one that felt like an ode to Jaws almost. It's, taking place on an island, and there's a lot of crazy things happening, but, unfortunately, spoiler here, no sharks are really involved, so there is that, but I thought this was a really, really strong entry in the Hill House comics, and if you are a fan of movies like Jaws, and it has Stephen King references, of course, so that was something that immediately drew me in. You also have The Low, Low Woods from the Hill House comics, and this story was written by Carmen Maria Machado and illustrated by Danny. It's so fantastic. It's kind of like Paper Girls meets Stranger Things, and if you haven't read Paper Girls, that leans a little more sci-fi, so, this kind of brings in more elements of the small town horror vibe that you have going with Stranger Things, which obviously both of those do have sci-fi elements to them, but I really like the way that The Low, Low Woods plays with the small town setting and incorporating the horror element into that, and it gives you this sort of coming of age story as well, which I thought was really, really well done. If you are looking for something a little older, maybe you want to go back and read some of the older horror comics, I recommend checking out House of Secrets. And with some of the older stuff, there aren't going to be all of the issues on DC Universe Infinite, but there's plenty there to get you started. A lot of these will have 40 or 50 issues, which might not be the full run, but I think it's great to go back and check out some of the things that came before a lot of the Hill House stuff. However, if you are looking for something that is directly related to the DC superheroes and tells a horror story from a superhero kind of perspective, I recommend checking out DCeased by Tom Taylor. It is a more recent series, so there's a bit to dig into, and I really think that this was something that was pretty well received considering how much it leaned into the horror element, which superhero comics don't do a whole lot of, and I think that's why, people who are fans of both horror and superheroes like myself were very intrigued by this story, and you really get a lot of cool things happening in there. Last but not least, we have American Vampire 1976. This is one that just recently hit DC Universe Infinite, so at the time of me recording this, there's only one issue out, but I read the original entry into the series that Scott Snyder co-wrote with Stephen King, and I was immediately hooked, so 1976 is a great one to read as well, and I highly recommend checking out any horror comics when you can, so I have been looking them all up on DC Universe Infinite, and I hope you enjoyed this video. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. You can check out my podcast, Welcome to Geekdom and Chat Cemetery. There are links to all of those things in the show description. You can also follow me on Twitter and Instagram. I'll see you next time.